Today, we will witness how the famous label of the 70-year-old invincible Russia myth is being torn down, and we will sign the official death certificate of this collapse. The massive empire of fear that Vladimir Putin has woven over 25 years is now turning into a pile of rusted metal. This is not a crisis. This is the closing symphony of an era. What have they been telling us for years? The Russian army is the second greatest power in the world.
Hurrah!
Russian air defense systems won't let a fly through. The Kremlin's weapons are superior to American technology. Forget all that. It's all gone to waste. The latest leaked documents and images from the field prove that Russia is not just experiencing a logistical crisis, it is also having the superpower label ripped from its collar. This is not a crisis. This is a global humiliation. Capitals that were once Moscow's allies are now shouting one truth: Russia is no longer a superpower. According to files decrypted by United 24 Media, Russia is no longer making a profit selling its most advanced warplanes to China. It is losing money. Just think, the former Big Brother is now selling planes to China as if paying a loyalty tax. But the real earthquake happened in Venezuela. Those legendary Russian missiles that Maduro trusted and poured billions of dollars into couldn't shoot down a single American aircraft. US jets blinded Russian radars, picnicked in Venezuelan skies, and turned those systems into scrap. This event sent shockwaves from Ankara to New Delhi, from Tehran to Yerevan. Allies are fleeing. Customers are canceling orders. Turkey is discussing returning the S-400s. India is turning to the west. Iran is trembling. Today on Mr. Warlog, we reveal Putin's worst nightmare, the collapse of the Russian defense industry, and how the paper tiger got soaked with documents. If you're ready, let's begin. Welcome to the funeral of an empire. Our destination is Beijing, Russia's strategic partner. How does an empire end? First, by losing its dignity. Secret internal company communications obtained by United 24 Media reveal how Russia has become a vassal state. According to the documents, Russia's aviation giant is losing money while selling its pride and joy, the Su-35 fighter jets, to China. Normally, arms sales are the most profitable business in the world, but Russia is so desperate, so cornered, that it is selling below cost to avoid losing the Chinese market. This is not trade, my friends. This is a loyalty tax Moscow is paying to Beijing. Under the guise of a strategic partnership, Putin is gifting the last remnants of Russian engineering to China. What is China doing? It takes those planes, copies the technology, adds its own avionics, which are better than Russia's, and sells them to the world. Russia is feeding its own killer with its own hands and paying for it. Superpower Russia has now been reduced to China's cheap raw material and technology dump. But the real shame is not about money, it's about performance on the ground. And that performance is a complete fiasco. Let's turn our attention to Venezuela. Who did Nicolas Maduro rely on to keep his regime afloat? Russia. He paid billions of dollars for Buk M2E air defense systems while his people were starving. What did the Kremlin say? These systems create a no-fly zone. Not even an American fly can get in. The truth, however, was revealed by reports from United 24 and Charter 97. Venezuela lost almost all of these systems. And do you know what's worse? These super Russian weapons couldn't shoot down a single American plane, not even a single drone. 0 hits. A complete failure. How did this happen? US jets effectively blinded Russian radars using electronic warfare methods. The Buk M2E screens went dark, and as the jets flew overhead, the systems couldn't even lock onto them, mistaking them for ghosts. While these batteries were physically present, strategically, they were now no different from piles of metal. This incident will go down in military history as the bankruptcy of Russian technology. Maduro thought he was buying security from Russia. It turns out he was just buying expensive coffins. These images scream this message to the world. Don't trust Russian weapons. Don't throw your money away and send your soldiers to their deaths. The sounds of those explosions in Venezuela echoed thousands of kilometers away, in Tehran and Ankara. First, Iran. According to an analysis by Defense Blog, the fiasco in Venezuela and the failure of Russian systems in Israel's recent operations created a shockwave in Russia and Iran. Generals in Tehran are now looking at maps and asking, If the Buk systems in Venezuela couldn't see American jets, can our S-300s see Israeli F-35s? The answer is frighteningly clear. No. The security Russia sells is just an illusion. And Turkey? The years-long S-400 debate may be coming to an end. According to a report by Ekatha Marini, while Ankara is negotiating with the US to return to the F-35 program, it has put returning, or packing up and storing, the Russian S-400s on the table. Why? Because Turkey has seen it too. The S-400 may be a great weapon on paper, but in the field, it is a blind mass that cannot be integrated into NATO systems. Turkey does not want to waste time with Russian junk when it has a fifth-generation fighter jet, F-35 or KAAN. This is one of the biggest blows to the prestige of the Russian defense industry. The crisis is not just technological, but geopolitical. Russia is losing its traditional backyard and its biggest customer at the same time. According to an analysis by the Moscow Times, Russia's arms diplomacy in India and the South Caucasus has completely collapsed. India was Russia's most loyal and largest arms buyer in the world. But when New Delhi saw the T-90 tanks exploding and the Su-30Os crashing in Ukraine, it said, "I'm out of this." India is no longer buying Russian aircraft, it is buying French Rafales. It is not buying Russian tanks, it is developing its own technology or looking to the West. This is an economic death sentence for Russia. And the Caucasus, Armenia and Azerbaijan. For years they saw Moscow as the police of the region. But when they saw how Russian weapons were helpless against Turkish and Israeli drones in the Karabakh War, the spell was broken. No one fears Moscow anymore. No one trusts Moscow. Russia is leaving the place it entered as a peacekeeping force, as an unwelcome guest. Nature abhors a vacuum, my friends. So does geopolitics. Russia's disappearance from the global arms market is not just a story of bankruptcy. It is also the story of the birth of new superpowers. As the Russian bear retreats into its den, the sharks that smell blood in the ocean have sprung into action. Who are they? First, South Korea. They are sucking up Russia's market share like a vacuum cleaner. Poland did not buy Russian tanks against the Russian threat, nor did it wait for German tanks. It went and ordered thousands of K2 tanks and K9 howitzers from South Korea. Why? Because South Korea is doing what Russia promised but failed to deliver. Fast, technological, and reliable delivery. While Russia buries its tanks in Ukrainian mud, Seoul is stealing Russia's former customers one by one. Second, Turkey. From Africa to Central Asia, Turkish UAVs are now flying everywhere Russia calls its backyard. African countries used to call on the Russian Wagner Group and Russian weapons against rebels. What are they doing now? They are knocking on Ankara's door. Because it has been seen in Karabakh, Libya, and Ukraine that Turkish technology is turning Russian metal piles into scrap. Russia's dominance in the cheap and effective weapons market is over. The world now wants field-proven, new-generation technologies, not Putin's scrap. This is not just an economic loss for Russia. It is a strategic encirclement. So, how did an industry that looks so strong on paper end up in this state? The answer is one word: corruption. The Russian defense industry had a slogan it used for years: analogovnet, meaning unparalleled in the world. Yes, they were right. There is no other corruption of this magnitude in the world. Leaked reports and intelligence analyses show that the billions of dollars the Kremlin allocated to develop super weapons did not go to R&D laboratories, but to the luxury yachts of generals and bureaucrats in Europe and their residences in Dubai. Why do you think the Buk M2Es in Venezuela didn't work? Because the money for the critical sensors inside those missiles was probably lost at a casino table in Monte Carlo. Instead of engineers to maintain the systems, ghost personnel, who existed only on paper, received salaries. This is a Potemkin village story. A painted, polished, intimidating military force on the outside, but hollow inside, with a stolen engine and a blind radar. Putin believed the shiny reports his generals presented to him. He thought, "Our army is invincible." But those reports were all lies the emperor wanted to hear. Now those lies are burning to ashes in the forests of Venezuela and the steppes of Ukraine. Do you know what the most shameful, most dramatic scene of this collapse is? The reversal of roles. The Soviet Union and later the Russian Federation were the world's arms supplier for 70 years. They armed China, India, North Korea, Vietnam. They were the big brother, the others were the little brothers. But look at the picture today. Vladimir Putin gets on his plane and flies to Pyongyang. He shakes Kim Jong-un's hand and begs him for artillery shells. He's knocking on the doors of Iranian generals, bargaining, "Give us some more Shahed drones." Russia, once a technology giant, now needs ammunition from North Korea, whose technology is stuck in the 1970s, and Iran, which is under embargo. This is the final nail in the coffin of its superpower status. If you have reached the point where you are begging for weapons from states you trained and established yourself, you are no longer the boss sitting at the head of the table. Russia has fallen from the global league. It is now a massive North Korea with nuclear weapons. An isolated, aggressive, but production capacity exhausted beggar giant. And finally, we come to the most dangerous part of this story. A Russia whose conventional, classical army is collapsing, whose air defense systems are riddled with holes, which cannot sell weapons. Do you think it will sit quietly in its corner? No. History tells us exactly the opposite. What does a bear do when it is cornered, its teeth pulled out, unable to use its claws? It plays its last and most deadly card. The failure of the Buk systems in Venezuela and the S-400s in Ukraine leaves the Kremlin with only one option: nuclear blackmail. Russia has no other instruments left to intimidate the world. It cannot intimidate with its economy. It cannot intimidate with its technology. It cannot intimidate with its military. All that remains is that red button. That is why we will hear much more nuclear threat from Putin and Medvedev in the coming period. Because conventional deterrence is over. Those missiles burning in Venezuela are actually sparks that increase the risk of nuclear war. A weak Russia is more dangerous than a strong Russia, my friends. Because an empire with nothing left to lose may dare to burn the whole world with it. We are not just watching Russia's collapse, we are also witnessing the beginning of the world's most dangerous gamble. Now let's sit back and put the pieces of this great puzzle together, my friends. Because today, we didn't just talk about a few failed arms deals or a few exploding tanks. Today, we performed an autopsy on an illusion that is melting away before our very eyes. Take another look at that 8-point collapse map I described to you over the last 20 minutes. What did we see? First, economic bankruptcy. A Russia that sold its most modern aircraft, the Su-35, to China at a loss, transforming from a big brother to China's gas station. Then technological blindness. Billions of dollars worth of air defense systems, Buk M2E, in Venezuela were blind and deaf against American jets. And loss of trust and market. Giants like Turkey and India now see Russian goods not as a strategic partner, but as a strategic ball and chain. Russia is retreating. The void is being filled by South Korea's speed and Turkey's intelligence. This picture screams one truth at us. Vladimir Putin's magnificent power vertical, built over 25 years, is actually a rotten tree hollowed out by termites. From the outside, it still looks massive and intimidating. But when a single wind blows, as in Venezuela, or a single blow is struck, as in Ukraine, it becomes clear how hollow that tree really is. Russia's problem is no longer just not being able to sell weapons. The problem is that it has lost its power to intimidate. An empire stands on fear more than respect. If your most trusted missiles, S-400s, Buks, can't hit their targets, if the turrets of your invincible tanks are blown up, and if, while proclaiming "I am the world leader," you are begging North Korea for artillery shells, then no one fears you anymore. Washington doesn't fear you. Brussels is not afraid. Even Yerevan and Astana are no longer afraid. This is precisely where the real danger begins. What becomes of a Russia that has lost its prestige, whose technology has collapsed, whose economy is mortgaged to China, and whose conventional army is melting away? History gives us the answer. A wounded and cornered